Hello friends, my name is Madeline, and today I'll be doing the Thank You Next book tag. This tag was created by Janine over at The Storian over at the end of last year, and I recently saw it on Angelica's channel, so even though nobody tagged me and I am a little late to the game, I figured that doing this tag would be a great opportunity to talk about some 2018 books that I didn't get to talk about. Yes, another year that I didn't finish wrapping up all of the books that I read in the year. I had a little bit of a push towards the end of the year and I got like 2 additional videos up, but I didn't get through all of my reading. It's February now, so I just figured I'd talk about some of those books through this tag, and then I can say thank you next to 2018. The first question is to name a book that you said thank you next to, i.e. DNF'd. Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I read about 150 pages of this book when it first came out, and then I thought maybe that we would read and talk about this on the podcast because it was getting a big marketing push over the summer with the whole Jimmy Fallon thing, so I sent the book away to my best friend. That's why I only have the jacket. And then after it was gone, I realized that it was kind of a relief that it was gone and I didn't have to read it, and so I quickly just told Nicole to forget about it. Like, I put it on a hold, like maybe in the future list, but the further I get away from the actual reading experience, the less that I want to read it. I'm not gonna hate on this book for using some well-worn fantasy tropes because they're tropes I generally like. I love chosen one stories, and they may be well-worn tropes, but it's with the added benefit of a diverse cast. If we can do those stories a million times with non-diverse casts, I'm not going to hate on this book for trying it with something that we don't see all the time. However, when you read a book whose plot is so transparent, like this one felt for me, then there really needs to be a connection with the characters. That connection wasn't there, and this is gonna seem contradictory, but the only way that I can explain it is that this was moving so fast that it was boring me. I couldn't form a connection with anyone or with the world. It was speeding by, but in a way that, like I said, was very transparent. Because it was moving so fast, I felt like I never got an anchor. The world and everything in it felt a little bit too neat, especially in a story that was supposed to be adventurous and violent. This, I'm sorry to say, was definitely overhyped, especially for the caliber of writing and storytelling that we received from Adeyemi. Is this DNF forever? I don't know, but probably. Question number 2 is to name a book that taught you love, and I actually have 2 books. First is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is an adult fantasy, a mythological retelling that follows Circe, the daughter of Helios, who doesn't have powers like her father or her siblings and doesn't feel like she fits in with them either. She eventually gets banished to an island, and there she figures out that she is a witch, and the rest of it is just really following her story. Circe often toes the line between goddess and human, and we get to see her navigate very familiar waters like loneliness and a family that is wild and what she wants to do with the rest of her life. And all of it is seated in an epic. This was definitely more accessible and readable than I was expecting. Something about it and the way that people were talking about and reviewing it made me kind of prepare myself to enter something that was dense, and I don't think it is at all. I think it is very accessible, as I said. It was also a great balance of the action that you often get in journey books and like the slow, easy pace of a character study. I used to love Greek mythology. I read the Odyssey in the 5th grade, and we did it as a class, and we really studied Odysseus's entire journey. Like, we had to memorize everywhere that he stopped and each creature or god or person that he spoke to at every stop and things of that nature. So Greek mythology stands out in my memory as like an access point to reading and something that really formed me as a reader, but I haven't had a lot of interaction with Greek mythology in later years. Even so, I had enough of a memory or a basis of knowledge that it was really fun to see those characters pop in and out of Circe's story. I immediately fell in love with Circe, and I felt for her, even if she was turning men into pigs or raging against the world, because Miller did a fantastic job showing us why she behaved the way that she did. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Another book that taught me love, Anne of Green Gables by L.M. M. Montgomery. This is a children's classic that follows Anne, who is accidentally adopted by two siblings who wanted a boy to help them around the farm. So Anne immediately tries to win them over so they will keep her. It often happens to me with classics that I haven't read that pop culture has somehow informed what I know about the story, and so I feel like pop culture prepared me for the plot that I would find here, but not necessarily for the character that I would find here. I loved Anne, and I loved her imagination, and I loved how she viewed the world, and I loved being immersed in that worldview for a little while, and I even loved her for her shortcomings and all of the ways that she was kind of annoying sometimes, but all of that, you know, it just made her a really great character. This is a very warm and welcoming read, and while this has stakes, there was something about it that didn't have a lot of friction, and so it became a book that was really great to relax with and to read after work or things of that nature. It is still very certainly a children's story and one from the 1900s, so there are some very strong morals and some teachable lessons and things of that nature. But overall, I'm going to file this away as a book that I'm regretful I didn't find as a child, and that if I ever have children, they would definitely read. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Question number 3 is to name a book that taught you patience. I'm going with Alexander Hamilton by Chernow. This is obviously a biography of Alexander Hamilton, and it's the one that the famous musical Hamilton is based on. I've owned this for a couple of years. When I became Hamiltrash, I bought it and never read it, but in 2018 I actually got to see Hamilton, the touring cast. It was my 3rd time seeing the show, and I decided that I wanted to read this and finish this before I saw the show, and so it would make the experience, I thought, a little bit different or add something to it. This is long and dense, which is why I'm saying it taught me patience, but honestly this was fascinating, both as a biography and as the source material of another piece of media that I really love. It was really interesting to see the places where you could tell that Lin-Manuel Miranda pulled from and the inspiration and the pieces of the story that he decided to keep. Additionally, I was like way too invested in the politics of the past. I was like really upset with the founding fathers in a lot of ways. Like, I was really invested in this as if the politics were current. There is a pro-Hamilton bias in this telling, but I think that the author is pretty open about it, and he isn't afraid of telling you when Hamilton was wrong or what other biographers say about Hamilton, so it didn't bother me because he was open about it. I ended up giving this 4.5 or 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know. I was like on a Hamilton high, so maybe I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know how fair of a rating that was, but I really enjoyed it. Speaking of patience, in 2018 I finished the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I cannot believe that I read all of these pages in 2018. This is a long series. It is sometimes unnecessarily long, and it isn't only like world building sometimes. It just doesn't need to be as long as it is. And also, this series contains some of my favorite characters of all time. And again, going back to the source material of another piece of media that I very much enjoy was interesting. We covered all of these books for the podcast, and those conversations were some of my favorite podcast episodes. So there was a lot of good to get out of here. While I was in the middle of reading this, I wasn't always enjoying myself, but in hindsight, I always enjoyed the books better after I was out of them. There's so much material here, and I think that a lot of that world building is probably better appreciated once you have the full story and on reread and rereads and just kind of absorbing all of the stuff that Martin throws your way. George R.R. Martin is a great world builder, and he's created some fascinating characters. He's not an amazing writer. His dialogue is not great, and some of the things that he does, the repetition and things of that nature, are just really annoying. And so if you want to give this series a try, I think you have to do it with that in mind, that it is bloody, high fantasy, very graphic. He doesn't write women particularly well. He's not a very good writer in terms of dialogue, but there is a lot of plot and a lot of world here, and some very complex and interesting characters. I think I averaged 3 or 4 stars for the series in each of these books. Question number 4 is to name a book that taught you pain. For this question, I chose a book that was good that taught me pain, so it's like a good hurt. Chemistry by Weike Wang. This is a short novel about a woman who is in the 3rd year of her graduate degree in chemistry, and she is very much struggling through finishing it and through deciding if chemistry is even what she wants to do, but dealing with the pressure from her Chinese parents to achieve something. And then on top of that, she's also struggling with questions about her relationship. Her boyfriend has recently proposed and she has not answered him one way or another. The entire time that I was reading this, I was very much enjoying it and thinking a lot about the reasons that other people would not. This is told in a stream of consciousness narration style, which means that we jump around a little bit and in ways that probably don't seem to make sense unless you think about like your own thoughts in the stream of your own thoughts. Like, this is how sometimes you think. You're thinking about something and it kind of jumps here and there, and this story really captures that. Additionally, it is very open-ended, and so people who want to come to something, I think, with a plot and a little more organization will find this frustrating. I also think that I really enjoyed this because I could relate to it, and I could see this kind of flying over the heads of people who don't have that point of entry and don't understand the pressure, the family pressure, the societal pressure of immigrants and first-generation Americans to achieve. Wang wrote this beautifully, and there were turns of phrases here that made me smile, even while my heart was hurting for our main character and for all of the ways that her struggles to find herself and plant herself were incredibly relatable. This was absolutely beautiful, and it is a book that I've carried in my feelings since I read it at the end of 2018, and I feel like I'm going to carry it in my feelings for a very long time. Question number 5 is to name a book that you loved at the time of reading, but in hindsight you do not like as much anymore, but in which you still learned something. I'm going with Vicious by VE Schwab. I originally read this in 2012, and I reread it in 2018 for the podcast. I gave it, I think, 4 or 4.5 stars when I first read it, and there's still a lot to enjoy here, but I think in rereading it specifically to discuss, I was able to pinpoint more of the issues with the story. For one, in the 2 books that I've read by Schwab, I did not like the way that she wrote female characters in either of them, and coming back to Vicious really highlighted that for me. There are characters in here that they're developed around some really visible tropes, just women's sacrifice to a male's plotline, and it kind of informed the way that I felt about her female character. I think Lila was her name in A Darker Shade of Magic, and I don't want to test this theory and keep reading things by her, because both that Lila, I think her name was, really frustrated me. It's part of the reason I couldn't continue on with the series, because I just disliked that character so much. And so then to come back to this and realize that she didn't particularly write her female characters very well in this either. The story struggles in pace, and it is layered, which is why I forgive it at the end, because it really is building towards something, and it's building it effectively, and it's building it to an end that I love. However, she could have solved it by just taking a little bit more time in the opening chapters instead of jumping around as violently as she did. That's like a very strong word, but it was very, very choppy in the beginning, and it doesn't let you grab a foothold into her world, and so it's very difficult for the first half of the story to even feel like you're invested in it. Additionally, I didn't notice on the first read that there should be a trigger warning delivered with the story, because there is self-harm in this book, and you are also in the head of some not so great dudes, and it is difficult to read about at times. So there's just so much that I noticed. Not all credit to me. I did notice a lot, but also in talking about this book with Nicole and with Kat, I was able to see things that I hadn't seen the first time around. So I don't love this as much as I did the first time around. I'm more able to see its flaws. I still think it is a fascinating read, and it's got some really great and interesting characters and a found family for a portion of it that is forever in my feelings, and it's taught me a lot. It taught me a lot just about reviewing and things I like and kind of picking it apart. But yeah, flaws. Question number 6 is to name a book you are currently talking to, something you're currently reading. Right now I'm reading Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, and I am about 35 pages in. 87. I'm 87 pages into this and I'm really enjoying it. I think it is moving very quickly, very smoothly. I'm interested in the point of view of the characters and I'm already a little bit stressed for both of them. And it's really interesting because I know that this got some mixed reviews on BookTube and there's people who really disliked it that are in my subscription, people I follow. So I'm reading it like, why do people hate you? And somebody actually commented on my Goodreads status that if I'm going to dislike this book, it'll probably be because of things that happen towards the end. So now I'm very much like reading it with that like, okay, trying to see which side I will land on. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying this. I'm a little bit biased because I saw Mary H.K. Choi on some panels at Y'all Fest, I believe, and she was delightful, absolutely delightful, and I loved what she said about this story. So I'm also reading it with that in mind, with that paratext. We'll see. I hope to finish it over the next couple of days. I'm flying through it currently and we'll see how I feel. And the last question is to name a book that's going to last. The book that helped you love yourself a little bit more. No one is surprised that I'm going to name The Poetexed by Elizabeth Acevedo. This has recently won some awards and I'm just so happy that more people are getting it on its radar since I couldn't stop talking about it in 2018. This book was very important in terms of representation for me. It is about a Dominican American girl. It is about her relationship with faith and her family and her own body, and I think that seeing that experience represented in fiction and seeing somebody else, even if it is a fictional person, going through things that I thought were incredibly relatable helps me reframe my experience. Obviously I'm no longer this age, so it is a little bit different, but it is still that sense of satisfaction of looking back and understanding a little bit of what I went through as well. I'll also name Hunger by Roxanne Gay. This is nonfiction and it is about Roxanne Gay's relationship with her own body. There are trigger warnings for sexual assault and she just really explores how she treats her body, how others view her body, and how that is all wrapped up in her experiences. I always very much struggle to review nonfiction, especially memoirs, and especially this one because it is so raw and honest. That said, Gay wrote this very deftly and I was just immersed in seeing her point of view. It's an exercise in empathy, but it wasn't until I finished the book that I realized it was also making me reevaluate my experiences with food and hunger and my experience with my body. That's it for me today. If you have read or would like to read any of the books I mentioned, let's talk about it down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching this video and I will see you guys soon. Oh, Jesus. Ugh. Oh, it's gonna rip my hoop out. Nope, I'm not doing it. Okay. Maybe this way. Jesus, I'm out of breath. Ugh, that was a bad idea.